Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm the host, Sean Boyce, and I'd like to welcome my guest to the show today, Dr. Mike Palanski, who is both a professor at RIT and the head coach of the Me First Academy. Hello, Mike. How are you? And welcome to the show.
Hi, Sean. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you. Before we go into what we want to talk about today, if you wouldn't mind, can you share a little bit more information about your background and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much. So I describe myself as a pracademic, which is the mashup between practitioner and academic. And I thought I coined that term, but then when I Googled it, I realized, no, I didn't coin it.
I like it. It's the first time I've heard it. And I think it's really cool.
Right? I mean, it sounds good. And the reason why I describe myself as such is I have a foot in both worlds. So I'm a professor of management in the Saunders College of Business at RIT here in Rochester, New York. And I've been here for, 13 years now. So awesome. It is. It's a fun place to be. I teach classes in leadership from all levels, undergraduate, MBA, executive MBA, and I also dabble in business ethics, which I still scratch my head at that one. I guess they wanted to trot out an example of what not to do and have me teach it. So I have some fun with that as well. And also cross-cultural management. Those are my three main areas. So that's the academic side. And on the practitioner side, I am the founder of MPower2Lead, which is my coaching and consulting practice. And right now, my big focus is on the Me First Academy for Next Big Challenge leaders. So this is my collaborative for leaders who are facing the next big challenge, a new role, a new job, taking on a new change initiative. Or sometimes it's just, I don't know what I want to do, Mike, but it ain't this anymore. So those are my people. Yeah.
Very cool. And very familiar with that as well, too. I talk with a lot of people that are in situations like that. So I'm sure it's very nice to have that kind of help when folks are kind of at that crossroads.
Yeah, for sure. It's a special time.
Very cool. And big fan of RIT as well, too. I went to Drexel, which wasn't a technology institute when I was there, but it used to be. And I know a number of people from RIT, and they're all extremely sharp. So whatever they're doing at RIT, it's definitely working.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah. Thanks.
Very cool. Well, thank you for sharing, Mike. That's helpful to note and helps us with kind of stuff we want to talk about here today. I think a good place to kind of probably go first would be to learn more about the business work that you do. Talk a little bit more about your business, like what do you do, who do you help? Any examples of that would be cool. Before we talk more about anything between like business development and marketing and solving the like feast and famine problem in running a business like that.
Yeah, for sure. So thanks. So by its very nature, my academic, my university work in leadership, both on the teaching side and also the research side, it lends itself to actually getting out into the world and doing it. It's leadership, which is about the most applied discipline that there is. So along the way, I have worked with mostly executive MBA students for over a decade. I've implemented and designed my own 360-degree surveys, which is a leader development tool, and coached the students in that program to understand the results and to grow as leaders. Because I was doing that, I decided pretty early on to hang out the shingle. And along the way, I've done some one-on-one coaching, done some consulting, but it's always been hit or miss. When things would come along, if I had interest and capacity, I would do them, but it could be, a year between different jobs. And sometimes they would come right on top of one another. About 3 years ago, I decided, I'd like to actually make a business out of this instead of just a hobby for which I sometimes would get paid. And I initially started down the consulting route. I was working with a call center in Florida. Everything was going well. I was going in to design, a top to bottom leader development program. Then COVID hit, and within 2 weeks, went from my site visit where everybody was fired up to everything shut down, including my counterpart losing her job. at that company.
Gotcha.
So yeah, right. That's my COVID story. I know everyone has one. But in some ways that was maybe a good thing because it forced me to pump the brakes a little bit while I was trying to balance my university job, home life with all the kids home and my spouse, who's a mental health therapist, not being able to meet with clients, but having clients who needed her more than ever. Yeah, it was
Well said.
It was a crazy, crazy time.
Oh yeah.
The upside was I realized, at least at this stage of my life, I need to be efficient more than anything else. And so I decided to focus on the coaching and development part versus the consulting part. So fast forward over the course of the last year, maybe 18 months, I founded the Me First Academy for Next Big Challenge leaders. And as I said at the top of the show, Next Big Challenge leaders are typically mid-career, and I throw a pretty big net to capture mid-career.
Sure.
I work with everyone from people that and maybe are in their very late 20s, early 30s that have had a lot of early career success, maybe even managed some teams, but are now thinking, what do I want to do? To the people that are in their late 30s, early 40s who have had even more success, but really want to move way up in the company or out and do something completely different.
Very
and
cool.
Then sometimes I even get folks a little bit later on in their career, the typical second act people that really do want to make a shift to something different because they've been there, done that, have had a great ride and are ready for something new.
Very cool. I have to imagine that becomes particularly interesting work as you're diving into what people have done and then what they want to do next, taking on, as I think is pretty much accurately described and positioned, that next big challenge, right? I imagine you get to talking with a lot of folks who are ready for something bigger, if not significantly bigger than they've worked on before.
That's exactly it. And what's interesting, at least to me, is that next big challenge usually comes in one of three forms. There's the, I already have a dream. I already have an inkling of what I'd like to do, and I'm trying to work towards it. There are the folks that have had their next big challenge handed to them already, either through things that they've worked for before and are just now coming to fruition. But sometimes it's a shock, either positive or negative. The proverbial offer you can't refuse that comes out of left field, or sometimes it's something tragic happens, or a challenge, somebody loses a job, someone gets sick, and now they have it on their plates whether they wanted it or not. And then the third group are the ones that I mentioned that I don't know what it is, but it's not this. And sometimes the really interesting people are the ones in that situation where actually their current situation is not bad, right? There's a good job, good life, it's fine. But there's just that knocking at the door that they just can't ignore anymore.
Yeah, like a calling almost. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I have to say I've been there myself, so I can relate to a certain extent. But it's cool though. It's exciting talking about kind of what the next chapter is. And I got to imagine it's always helpful to have someone who's kind of been there, done that. We can provide additional perspective and help folks think through this, because it's also a little bit scary and intimidating, even for those that have been around the block before quite a bit. So there's probably a lot to discuss.
Right. Yeah. There's no shortage of things to talk about. That's
interesting questions, probably unique ones too.
Yes.
And I'm sure you get when helping people figure this out. Very cool. Super interesting work. Obviously, probably exciting for you as well too, as you figure out kind of as they go forth and prosper while you're helping them, cool things that they conquer and new challenges, what that possibilities that creates, which is super interesting as they climb from that point. And then next, obviously, and what we talk a lot about on this show is for folks like you and I that are doing work, typically independently to an extent, freelance, consulting, coaching, these types of things, there's an element of us to have to kind of like be doing a number of things in addition to actually doing the work, right? It's like growing the business, meeting folks, finding those that need our help, communicating the value proposition, marketing, all that kind of stuff. So I'm also curious to learn more about how you manage all of those tasks as well too. Like what has worked for you? What have you tried that hasn't worked? anything you're interested in sharing, and as you've been figuring those out and growing your business, from anywhere from like a business development and sales perspective all the way to and through marketing. I'd love to learn more about.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you asked that, and I'm so glad that those are the things that you talk to your guests about and kind of at the heart, because you're right. We all deal with those and probably struggle at times.
It's tough
with those as well. That was one of the reasons why, at least for now, I wanted to pivot away from consulting, which to me is very gig oriented, to coaching, which I'm tend to find is a little bit more systemic and sustainable. Mm-hmm. It's on the consulting side, right? Go from one thing to the next, and as I mentioned earlier, sometimes there would be a long lull in between. And for me, that was okay, because this wasn't my primary occupation.
Right. Well said.
Which is blessing and curse. A blessing because certainly there's not the pressure there, mm-hmm. especially the financial pressure, but also curse because the pressure isn't there. Right. I can always say, whatever, don't worry about it. And when I was working on a consulting gig, I probably love that more than anything else. I love being on site, not knowing what's going on, trying to figure out who the players are, trying to figure out what the problems are, right? Just that ambiguity, I come alive.
Me too. I love it as well.
Nothing so like cool it in the world, and the messier, the better.
Right, exactly.
But it's the lead up to get to that point, and then all of the cleanup work after it that really is draining. And if I could just be on site doing that stuff in the moment, I'd do that the rest of my life. So switch to the focus in coaching, and what I'm working on right now, and it's coming about, but I think if we have this conversation in a year from now, I'll be able to answer that much better. On the service side, I kind of have a 3-tier approach. So these are all under the guise of the Me First Academy. And the introductory part is an online community where leaders are coming together. They can have interactions with one another. Think Facebook group type chat, right? So asynchronous chat-based approach. Along with that, I offer all of my trainings that I've put together through the years. We do a weekly live session. Sometimes that's open question and answer with me. I invite guest experts in to talk about various topics. And what I'll be introducing very soon is a one-on-one fishbowl coaching experience, where I'll coach somebody live for about 30 minutes in front of everyone else, and then we'll debrief. So lots of different avenues to be able to connect and to learn without it being onerous, either in terms of time commitment or in financial commitment. The next level up that I'm just starting right now, in fact, we're halfway through the inaugural beta version, is a cohort-based model where we're spending 6 weeks working together. It's me and, in this case, 3 clients, so a very small, intimate group. And we're working through the Me First method, which is my proprietary framework for development. Having a great time. Cool. So I think that's awesome. It's going to definitely be something that has legs. And then that final tier would be one-on-one coaching, which I've always done. And I find that both gratifying and also the most challenging. Even when I'm talking to somebody about what that is, it's kind of difficult to answer that, well, what does that look like question, because it is so specific to the individual person. And that is one of the challenges, to be able to represent it accurately, but also say, sometimes we get in there and we throw this whole thing out because that's not where the conversation needs to go.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. So you got 3 pretty good pillars there. And the first that you mentioned as well, too, kind of those coaching sessions that you share and what you fit into what I would describe as a routine, I think is something that I've also figured out, which has helped me quite a bit, figuring out like what's something that you can you can incorporate into a routine that fits into the work that you're already doing. So
Right.
you're not as affected, and those factors that have a tendency to take us away from these activities that we really should be continuously investing into to some extent in order to be able to grow and spread awareness and build ourselves as an authority. The element that I found that's worked best for me too is figuring out how to incorporate it into a routine. Because
Mm-hmm.
if it's something I'm doing sporadically, that's something that's so easy to just kind of fall off when I get
Right.
busy with anything else.
So true. It's so true. And yeah, I'm learning that lesson the hard way. And
I
if
did the
somebody
same.
were to, right? But here's the funny thing. I don't know if you've experienced this. If someone were to come and ask me to speak about that, or, just a one-on-one conversation to get some advice,
Yep.
I would absolutely say, do less, focus more, right?
Yeah.
Routine. I would give all the right bullet
Right.
points. But boy, I sure have a hard time taking my own advice.
It is tough, man. It's really difficult. That's such a great point. It's like the shoemaker's shoes problem, right? I worked
Right.
as a mechanic back in the day, and they were all fantastic at fixing the customers' cars, but their cars were a mess.
Right. Right.
That is just such a common thing that you see everywhere, and same here, like no exception.
I just end of last week, a good friend of mine owns her own digital marketing agency, and she's grown it from a solo practice. I think she now has 6 employees, and this is in
Cool.
6 or 7 years.
Nice.
They just launched their website. I think she maybe had like a landing page, but she and her team design these beautiful websites and help people do all this stuff. And hey, don't you think it's time maybe you have one?
Right. Where's yours, right? That's wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's amazing how that happens. And over a longer period of time too. People don't even realize it. That's such a great point, is that having the ability to kind of take a step back and evaluate, coach yourself to an extent, which it can be very difficult to do. As such, the work that you do, I have a coach myself. I'm an advocate for everyone to have one as well also, because even if they're just telling back to you what you would have told yourself, that's a really hard thing for people to do for themselves.
Right.
And it's never necessarily, sometimes it's not quite as clear until it's coming from someone else that you know or trust, or someone helping hold you accountable to those things. Because left to my own devices, I feel like I can, with enough perseverance, I feel like I could solve most problems. But that's one that's really difficult. And I've struggled, and I spun my wheels quite a bit because I didn't have that element. Once I've added it and I recognize the value of it, from that point forward, it kind of changed everything. And now I just look for making sure I'm paired with the right coach, depending on which phase that I'm in.
It's so true. And to me, that's the value of coaching.
Definitely.
A good coach, it's not the knowledge that person has, although sometimes it is, certainly.
Sure.
But it's that ability to listen intently and hear things that you're saying that you don't even hear yourself, and reflect that back.
Yep.
Right? I mean, that's the magic of a coach. I hear you say X,
so true.
Tell me about X, and all of a sudden you think that person's a genius, and all they did was actually just listen to you for a hot second.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so true. I've had so many of those moments where I'm like, going into the conversation, I don't know which way is up. Coming out of the conversation, I'm like, I didn't know how I missed that, but I definitely did. And now it's so like the path forward to me is so clear. Because to your point, right, it's like you might think, and a lot of people find themselves in this routine as well too, this situation from time to time where they're like, do I really need that? The answer for me is always going to be yes, because I have not had it, and then I have had it, and measuring it in that way is a dramatic difference and huge help for me in all the things that I've been trying to do. And even if it is just that one element where I'm able to kind of get the kind of advice that I would give myself, but for whatever reason becomes exceedingly difficult to actually do that task or own that, just to have an appropriate sounding board, someone to bounce these ideas off of, someone to keep you from yourself, essentially, because, a lot of us have a tendency to want to be very driven and work on a bunch of different things. But in fact, we probably know in the back of our mind or subconsciously to some extent that we should be focusing on one or more of those elements. And we may not be doing that. And as such, that's not helping us.
Right. That's exactly it. In fact, actually, it fell on the floor because I was moving some stuff around. Anyway, I had a little sticky note on my monitor, and it simply said, out is greater than, the greater than sign, out is greater than outstanding. Right.
Awesome.
So right now, out the door trumps perfect every single time.
So true. That's another one that is, I talk about that from time to time because I have a background in technology as well too. So I used to write software,
Right.
and when you've only kind of learned that, at least this was the extent for me, and we were writing code and building stuff, we would push for it to be perfect and then be afraid to share with anyone until it was that, which of course it never is. So you get stuck in this infinite loop of basically never getting the product out there. So that has become for a lot of us. And what I say from time to time is we ship at 75%, which is basically like we release it to the world when it's 3/4 of the way done. The rest of it will come from there. And the rest of that work there is kind of diminishing returns at that point. So we need to get it out there. We need to test it.
Right.
Well said. Another difficult concept to really truly appreciate until you've been stuck in that routine.
Right.
Well said. Cool. So I love that. I also love the fact that you found something that complements the work that you do very well from a marketing perspective. This is why I built Podcast Chef, which is a service to kind of offer that for folks who want to do something similarly or find something they can invest in that helps them with, in particular, this area, business development, marketing, but matches kind of their routine. Because us as like soloists or small teams, there isn't a lot of time and effort to go around or anybody that can necessarily dedicate to like BD or marketing full time, right? Because we have to strike that balance of actually doing the work and then telling other people about the work, meeting people that might need our help, sharing the results, that type of thing. So what you've described in that like coaching session that others can kind of tune into, that gives you the ability to not just simultaneously do the work, but also show to others what, give them an idea, the ability to kind of experience it, as well as not just what it would be like if they were involved, but the value of it too, the type of conversations that you can have and the progress that you can make. I love seeing examples of those really efficient solutions to these creative or unique problems and challenges we have kind of growing and building these businesses. So I would definitely compliment you there. It's not something that like is diametrically opposed or dramatically different than what fits your normal routine. It's doing the things that you need to do in order to grow and share this with others, but it complements the work that you're already doing also very well.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that feedback, and it's such a balance. I also find myself sometimes solving problems that aren't problems yet.
Same here.
And I so appreciate the value of seeing several steps down the path or finding somebody else who can see those steps. And I think that that's really important to do. However, sometimes it's easy to focus on 10 steps down instead of the step that's right in front and end up doing a lot of things that aren't necessary right now at this particular stage. So that's another ongoing challenge.
Great tip. Yep. The whole like kind of a oversimplification version of it, but same idea, right? Don't, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. It's like, get that order down. There's a time and a place, prioritize, all that type of stuff. Excellent recommendation as well, because you can get stuck in over designing or over engineering anything when in reality, focus on the problem at hand first, move forward from there.
Right. You got it.
Better, more practical approach for sure. Awesome. Mike, thank you so much for being here. I've got a couple of questions for you before we let you go.
Sure.
And the first is to talk about any resources that you might want to talk more about, that where people can go to learn more about what we talked about on the show or your work in particular. And I know you have recently released a book, which I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about and share with our audience.
Yeah. So thanks. So yes, I recently published The Me First Method, A Leader's Guide to Finding, Facing, and Embracing Your Next Big Challenge, which is so much fun to work on. And for me, it does two things. Number one, it becomes my primary marketing and business development vehicle.
Well said.
And number two, it becomes my primary way of sharing what I have learned with the world. Right. So it's out there unashamedly. In fact, I say it it's on page 2 now. There's 2 reasons why I wrote this book, and I just named them. So I'm very transparent about why. So that's the best place to get to know me in greater depth. So it's mefirstmethod.com. That's ME, the numeral 1, ST, me first, mefirstmethod.com. And can purchase the book there. I have it in ebook form, EPUB for Kindles, PDF. Also have an audio version that I throw in, as well as a whole bunch of bonuses. $10. All right, so I'm just putting it out there as again, my way of sharing with the world, but also for people to get to know me. So that is the best way to learn about who I am and what I do.
Very cool. That's very exciting. Congratulations. I'm looking forward to learning more, getting a copy of it myself. I've heard it described well. You did a great job in terms of talking about how the book is going to be a great resource for you in all these important areas that we talked about on the show. But I think in terms of like how I've heard a book being referred to, it's like a 10,000 word business card or something like that. Something to the extent where it's like one of the best ways to learn more about you, the work that you can do, kind of results that can be generated, that type of thing. And just helps with everything else that you're trying to build. Yeah.
And I think that there's something kind of special about books. I mean, I love podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. I'm a diehard podcaster. I read some blogs for a few people, but I don't know. For me, there's just something about a book. They've been around for, hundreds of years. And I still think it's the best way to get to know someone that you're not sitting right next to.
Super well said. I love reading. I'm much more takes me much more time to read, because I'm a slow reader, but I love reading, and I do genuinely feel like I retain potentially a significantly more when I'm reading and diving in, perhaps because I'm investing more time. But I find that really valuable. I consume information from a ton of resources, podcasts as well, but the reading element will never go away. That's for sure. Yeah. I do like the Audible audio version. That's kind of cool because I can if I can focus on that too, I can consume it more quickly. But I agree. Like whenever I want to learn more about a topic, I always go to books first. That might be a little old school at this point, but I feel like if I find a really good book on a topic, I learn so much from that. And I still feel like that's one of the best resources.
I agree. And by the way, I recorded my own audiobook that I include here. So
I was going to ask about that.
Yes, it's included. It's all one package deal. And
Very cool.
For those of us out there that would like to listen on 1.2 speed, because that's more efficient. I never listen at regular speed to anything anymore.
Me neither.
I'm not a person that is necessarily in a big hurry, but that's something that really does get under my skin, is having to listen.
I have to do that too. I can't listen on normal speed. It's so funny. Super cool. That's awesome. I also love when it's recorded by the author as well too. I think that's a nice touch. Yeah. So well played there. Thank you, Mike. And last question I have for you is, who should reach out to you and how can they get in touch?
Sure, Sean. The people that I love to work with are those next big challenge leaders. So if you're listening and you are facing a new challenge, right? Taking on a new role, a new job, new company, a major change initiative, or if you're one of those, I don't know what it is, but it just ain't this, then let's talk. And you can get in touch with me two ways. One, just go to mefirstmethod.com, or I'm also quite active on LinkedIn. So you can look me up, Mike Palanski, on LinkedIn, and feel free to reach out to me there.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that and all those resources. For all of our listeners, we'll include links to everything in the show notes, including the book and Mike's contact information. So thank you, Mike. I just want to say how much I appreciate you being here and sharing your knowledge with myself and our audience.
Thank you, Sean. This has been so much fun, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Consulting Trap. If you have a suggestion for a future episode, or you would like to be a guest on our show, please send me an email at sean@podcastchef.com. That's Sean, SEAN, @podcastchef.com. PODCASTCHEF.com. Before we go, we'd like to thank the sponsor of our show, Podcast Chef. Podcast Chef helps turn ordinary podcasting into a revenue-generating lead magnet for your consulting business. Our Podcasting Done For You service takes away the headache of starting up and running your own podcast. Reach out now to take advantage of our 30-day money-back guarantee. Visit us at podcastchef.com to find out how our team of experts can help you leverage podcasting to take your consulting business to the next level.